Hi, everybody. Welcome to Interview with the Muse. This is a community for artists when curiosity is contraband. There's so much happening in the world right now, and there's a lot to be afraid of. There's a lot of despair out there. There's a lot of sense of like isolation that it's just like me over everybody else. And the reason I started this podcast was first and foremost to create a community where artists can build solidarity and start to talk about how the artistic process might actually hold clues for how to get free, for how to dream up new ways of being. So it's not just like the product of the art, like the end piece, but like what's that process like? And so today I'm like so excited because the homie, Robert Lou Trujillo, is here with us. This is my very first episode too, where I'm actually interviewing someone and not just talking to myself, which I have been
Yay, I'm
doing.
honored. I'm honored. I mean, you're
I
doing
know.
good talking to yourself, so
I try.
yeah.
It's how I stay sane, you know?
Yep, I heard that. Yep. We all got to talk to ourselves. Yep.
Sometimes you just really gotta like, pump yourself up.
Like, yeah, we
Um,
got this. Let's do this. Yep.
exactly. So today we're just gonna have a conversation. I'm gonna be able to like amplify some of Robert's work, but also just talk about, we're both artists that have been in the Bay a long time. You're from the Bay, but I came here as a transplant. You're somebody that I really just look up to in terms of your process, in terms of
Oh,
your
thank you.
politic. Yes, facts. And so I just thought it would be cool to have a conversation today. So how about we just get started? Can you just tell everybody your name, a little bit about yourself and about your artistic medium or mediums? Because I know you got a lot of different mediums out there.
Yeah. So my name is Robert Luther Hill. I'm an artist, born in Oakland, lived all over the Bay Area, Berkeley, El Cerrito, Richmond, Hayward, Union City, but Oakland is the place I've lived in the most. And my mediums, and well, it's all started with graffiti. That was like the doorway for it. So when I was a kid, one of them ones walking around writing on things. And then that opened the doorway to public art, doing murals, and in 2003 we founded a collective called Trust the Struggle. So that is more than 20 years old. And then when I became a father around the same time, really young, and kind of discovered there was a large gap in the children's book world for stories about kids like myself and like my son. And so started working in that area. And I've been doing freelance illustration for a long time as well. And I think just to survive as, as a creative person, like I sell merch and I make merch as well. And I think it's as an artist, it's having lots of discipline so they can't just take one from you and also just, hustling, just out here trying to do it the best you can. So yeah.
Exactly. And we were just talking about earlier how, well, I first met you because I moved from Seattle to Oakland to go to Mills College. I started living in the Fruitvale, where I've been living in the Fruitvale neighborhood. Folks will know the Fruitvale is also Fruitvale Station. It was Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan's first film. So this is a very
Yep.
magical and important place politically as well as artistically.
Yep.
And I remember I was working at Ascend Elementary School. I was an after school teacher. So those that don't know about the teaching world, the education world, um, after school teaching is particularly difficult because like think about it this way. You're a little kid, you've been in school all day, and then it's like after work, like
Yep.
so kids are like there and we help them with their homework, but then also we have like enrichment that we do. And I remember having a group of like 30 kids that I'm like,
Oh my God.
help
Yeah.
you. And I remember seeing this dude that had a dope afro. Like I was like, this guy's got like a crazy afro, like he's hella cool. And you were just so welcoming and just so sincere and just hella dope. And then I saw that you were an artist. So can you talk a little bit about like that connection between, nurturing the next generation, teaching and art, and just like how you got involved with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first I'll say you're an awesome soul, awesome human being, a very
I
and
appreciate it.
talented MC and organizer. So I really I look up to you as well. And it was awesome meeting you. Like we were both in a very similar place of like creative people trying to make a living, but doing something that we were proud to do at the end of the day, which is working with young people. And I think as a young person when I was in high school, there were not that many classes like that, and there were zero, as I recall, in junior high. But when I got to high school, I had a teacher, Dari Davis, and he had a after school program which you weren't required to go to. Sometimes it was actually during lunch, and it was
Wow.
called Live Lyricist Society, and it was all about. I wasn't an MC, but it was all about hip hop culture, and so lots of different people before me came through, and they would rap, they would DJ, they would do all these different things, and so he was the first person to give me a job as an after school teacher in the Bay Area, actually in Marin County.
Mm.
And that morphed into me working for Sisters of the Underground in San Francisco. Met a lot of artists from different disciplines there. And then I just worked all over the Bay. And even when I lived in New York, I worked at a lot of organizations in Harlem and Queens and Brooklyn. And it is a absolute honor and joy to be able to take what we know as artists and pass it along to young people. It is really an honor to be able to learn from them because if take off your teacher hat and just listen, you can really pick up a lot of game and knowledge from them because they have lives too. They have so many things that they learn. But yeah, it's definitely challenging because in a lot of these schools, they have a lot of kids and not a lot of money to hire a lot of support and having being an author and illustrator that goes to schools that are both public and private, I see the disparities in terms of like how many teachers per student, the type of materials and instruments and art supplies that they have. Yeah, it's very challenging, but it was rewarding. I think we were both there at a special time during Ascend, definitely.
Definitely. And what you're saying is so important for people to understand because talking about Hadari Davis, who, if folks don't know, Hadari is one of the co-founders of You Speaks, which is one of the most well-known and probably the premier spoken word organization in the whole entire country, and just plays a key role in the Oakland community. So there's that. And then also, I think people, because teaching is so devalued as a form of labor, as it's actually like a life-saving, job. And
Yep,
and a lot of the time there's this disconnect between being a teacher and being an artist. There's even this stereotype that those who can't do teach, which is very problematic because
right.
it assumes that if you're teaching, you're just doing it because you have nothing better to do. But there's people like us who see teaching as an art form, who see teaching as a form of liberation. And what you're talking about, especially when you're talking about kids, like I don't think people like understand, like even Kendrick Lamar talked about how it was a teacher, it was his English teacher who told him, you're an amazing writer, keep writing, or showed him
Yep.
a book that changed his life. And you're talking about Hadari helped you on a path. Who knows what would have happened if you hadn't been there? And it takes one adult that cares about you in school to change the trajectory of a young person's life. And like you're saying, I feel like you're speaking to like kind of like Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is an important text where it's like instead of the banking model of teaching, where we're just like, oh, we're just gonna insert this information into a child. We
Right.
see children as people that we can co-create with, as people. Obviously, we're the adult, and that is an important distinction. But like, people are like, why are you so good with kids? It's like I treat them like people. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't treat them like property. I don't treat them like I'm older, so I just know more than you. And like I remember teaching at Ascend was such an important part of me feeling safe and feeling a sense of community in the Fruitvale because at first when I would walk around, people would be like, "Who is this chick? Like she's dressed all colorful. Like what is she doing?" And then people noticed that I was the lady that was teaching all their kids, and
Right.
people, and also this community is very much Latino, Mexican, Guatemalan, and like people would come. It's also a space where people, where parents and families were safe from ICE, so they
Yeah.
would come after school and they would give me presents. And I had never been treated. Do you remember that? I never had been treating like that as an educator. And I was like, wow, like it, and I think that's also like culturally something in Latin American countries where like they treat the teachers differently or like make teachers feel like really, really invited and part of the community. So I just wanted to speak to that as well of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've heard from people who were born in other countries like El Salvador or Guatemala, it's like if that's a professional, you treat them with respect, like it's a
Yeah.
doctor or it's a teacher, like it comes with respect. Whereas here, like you said, it is very much downplayed the huge role that teachers have in young people's lives. Because as it goes, as the saying goes, it takes a community to raise a kid. Like if you have one great teacher or two great teachers or three, That is really powerful because we, as parents, we can't do it all ourselves. Like we really do need help.
Right.
Help sometimes to take a break, but to give them the game that we may have forgot or we just don't know that yet. And usually it's something very beneficial or like nourishing. So yeah, I can see why they were grateful for you.
Yeah, and for you too. And I think also as artists, on the flip, I think one of the things when I was growing up, art was like this extra thing. It was like, oh, you get to do that after you do these things.
Right.
And then as a teacher, I started to understand the methodology that, like, no, art is the core of everything you're doing. And
Yeah.
if you use that creative lens you can teach anything.
Yeah.
And it makes it fun and it makes it exciting. Like people think, oh, well, you're not really teaching. No, this is how, especially people of color, this is how we understand the world. It's through drawing, it's through dancing, it's through, speaking, it's through feeling the knowledge like within ourselves. And
Hmm.
so that's something that's re to this day, it's really hard to explain to people that who aren't artists.
Right. I
They
mean, I
just don't
think
get it.
yeah, they don't understand. I think when you, whatever type of art form it is, whether it's writing or music or dance or visual art, all of these things give young people one, like a great sense of power, but also direction and ownership. Because if you know what your story is and you have a vehicle for expressing it or explaining it, that's power. So much of education
Yes,
is what was built to, basically make factory workers 100 years ago. And so
that
for
part.
them to be able to like break out of that mold and kind of take control of the narrative and say, this is who I am and this is what I want to do, it's powerful. And so I think it's not a coincidence that hip hop was created after so much artistic funding for schools was cut. So
Exactly. And no matter what, people are going to make art. So there's going to be art that's going to come out of all of this.
right.
Um, so my next question I have for you is just kind of, I wanted to know just as an artist, as an incredible visual artist, what are some of your artistic and creative muses? So
Oh yeah.
like what kind of inspires you when you're sitting down to create?
Um, I mean, that's the funny thing too about art because I feel like it's more like turning it off. Like it's always on. Like if I'm sleeping, if I'm showering, if I'm eating dinner, like you're just always like a receptor, like receiving new information and new inspiration. But if I think of like persons, when I was a little kid, my mom worked at San Francisco General Hospital. She worked there for 40 plus years, and that's you go through the Mission District usually to get there. And
Mhm.
I would walk through the Mission and see just tons of murals as a kid. And when I went to San Francisco State University, one of my teachers was one of those muralists, and I just remember being really inspired by her talent, her grasp of like history, and her her pen, like her brush, like the way she wielded it, and that was Juana Alicia. And
Mhm.
also, when I was in high school, there was this graffiti writer from San Diego who came up to the Bay. He started teaching classes at my high school, Berkeley High. And he went to New York for a while, did a bunch of public art out there, and then he came back to the Bay, and that was Brett Cook. So those are like two
Damn.
big inspirations for me, like growing up. And I mean, like music wise, I feel like Bamboo and Rocky Rivera recently are really great muses just because of how they blend like the music and the politics. Dudat, who used to be part of the Attic. He was one of those kids at Berkeley High who would come to the Live Lyricist Society with Mr. Davis as well.
Hmm.
And then Boots Riley from the Coup. I think those are some. In terms of like books, there's a group of authors across the US have got together. It's called Authors Against Book Bans. There have been so many book bans of kids' books, like basically anything that has to do with people color or queer identity, and they've banded together to fight back against that. And then there's a coalition called the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies, and they are doing some great work to try and get basically to like spread knowledge and fight back against BS. So those are some ones that I like thought of today.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Robert's dropping a whole bunch of Bay history by all of those names that
Yeah.
he talked about. Each person that he talked about, you could go
Yeah.
look him up and learn so much. Fun fact, actually, that's like connections and solidarity
Yeah.
cross culturally. We're both mixed, but like I'm not like, I don't have Asian ancestry, but when I growing up in Seattle, it has a very strong Filipino presence similar to San
Yeah.
Francisco. And
Hmm.
actually in Seattle, the Youth Speaks in Seattle was kind of came out of Ingsang Mahal, which
Oh,
Rocky and Bamboo are, I think they have connections to in terms of the liberation movement in the Philippines. And, even today we can learn so much from the Philippines about what it's like to live under a dictator
yeah.
and what it's like to fight back. And so I just love like the connections because I used to there's a group called Blue Scholars,
Of course,
Geo.
the Blue
Yeah,
Scholars.
so
Yeah.
he might comment on this. I hope he sees this. But just
Yeah.
like the way that that art also can be used cross-culturally. And I just happened to learn a lot about like Filipino American cross national like organizing against fascism just
Yeah.
from an early age, and then poetry. So, and then another thing that really you remind me of being inspired by the murals in a mission,
Yeah.
I was also inspired by those because when I was 16, I got onto the national team representing Seattle in the Bay. And it
Well,
was my first time. I was 16. I'd never been to the Bay. I remember coming up from the BART into San Francisco into 16th Street and then seeing the murals. And I was like, where am I? Like, I'm in
yeah.
heaven. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And like, I was like, I gotta come here. And then
Yeah,
I
that's
had to figure
cool.
out how to get to the Bay after that.
It's funny you mentioned that too about Seattle too, because I definitely I've been to a couple of Pacific Northwest cities, Portland, Seattle, and other ones. And when I got to Seattle, I definitely felt a kinship. I mean, they had the Chinatown. They definitely
Mhm.
have Filipinos like the Bay and like the hills. Like
Yeah,
I'm an outsider, so I can't see all of the things that I don't understand about the history of the city, but like it definitely felt welcoming to me in terms of like the mixture of people and culture there.
definitely, definitely. And so speaking of which, I feel like it's an important time for us to also talk about like some of the misconceptions people have about Oakland because like
Oh, sure.
I love Oakland, but also I mean Oakland has broken my heart in some ways, but it's like a heart gets broken and it's open, like it
Yeah.
taught me the game, kind of like
Yeah.
Tupac says, it's like you learn the game. It's like it wakes it up in you like a religion.
Right.
Can you talk about just like being from Oakland and how Oakland has inspired you and what people get wrong about Oakland?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just say that like people will talk about the different parts of Oakland. So
Yeah, for sure.
when I was born, I lived by the lake, around Lake Merritt, and we moved, to other parts of the Bay, like Richmond, El Cerrito, lived all over there, lived in Berkeley, came back to the Bay Area. And when I was in high school, I lived at the top of Coolidge, which is like right underneath the Mormon Temple. And then from there, I've lived in West Oakland, North Oakland, East Oakland, all over Oakland pretty much. Um, and I think what people get wrong is like a lot of people will see information or their introduction to Oakland and what it's like as a city is through news. And so
Mhm.
the news is often kind of cycling a story of law and order. And if there's a city or a town or a place that is, breaking the law in any way, that is the news that they highlight. And I think it's no coincidence that in the early 1900s, there were just literally hundreds of Black-owned newspapers, not just in the Bay Area, but all over the US. And the reason for that was because you couldn't get news about people being born or like Black accomplishments or things like that because white newspapers wouldn't talk about them. They would
Mhm.
only talk about African Americans if it would have a relation to crime or breaking the
Mhm.
law in some way.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that racism still exists today when it comes to Oakland or Detroit or New York, any city where there's a large Black population. So what they put out there is like these folks are wilding out. We need this is why we need the cops to come in and like beat them up and like put them back in their place.
Mhm.
And that is I think the message that people who I talk to from outside of the Bay Area get. Even people in other cities in the Bay Area sometimes get. But what they don't see is like a long history of, organizing and activism that has forced people not only in the Bay Area but in places in other cities to think outside of the box in terms of what's impossible. And it goes back to that art of like, and this happens in other cities too, but like if you're an artist, you're able to envision things that don't exist yet, and that is a superpower. And I think that there's just a lot of beauty that happens here, whether it be the mixtures of culture, the music, the food, the languages. I mean, where I live, there's Arab people, there's Latino people, there's Black people, there's Asian people, there's white people. Like it's unique. It's not the only place, but it's unique where we are. So yeah, people get it messed up. Like if you just watch the news, you're going to see a lot of negativity. But if you come here and talk to people and see the many cultural institutions and events, you will see just a lot of joy and love and sharing. And yeah, there's negative things that happen. I've definitely had my heart broken by the city many times. But there's a lot of beauty here too. And I think we're not unique in the sense that Detroit is not going through this, or like Brooklyn or Atlanta is not going through this as well. Like the changes that are happening are nationwide, I think.
That was so poignant what you just said. Like especially just the way that you weaved it together with the past and the Law and Order story, this narrative. And I think as artists, one of the key things that I want to do with this podcast is showcase how important art narrative, whether it's visual narrative, because people don't understand, people take in information visually 10,000 times more than written.
Mm,
So visual artists are very important. And then two, the stories are being told by the right now. They have the monopoly over the narrative right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's why we're where we are. And I just think that what you're saying is super important for people to understand. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your creative process. So like, do you start working in the morning or late at night? And like how are you coming up with ideas? How are you deciding who you want to collaborate with and things like that?
Let's see. So I'll just use a story that's recent. So if I'm working, I've as I mentioned, I worked on a bunch of different mediums, but right now like a big thing is trying to craft stories and like imagine books. And so the
Right.
medium I work in often is picture books, and those are for children ages 4 to 8. So from preschool to the beginnings of elementary. And right now, I'm working on a new story and it's kicking my butt because it's just like I come from it from a visual lens and I'm a writer second. And so I'm still learning how to craft a story in the written word. But when I worked on a recent story that was called We Are Yoga or Somos Yoga, it was written by a local author she's been a teacher for like 20 years. Her name is Jill
Mm,
Guerra. And
mm,
she's taught in Oakland, Berkeley, lots of different schools. And she started off as a teacher who just a regular school teacher, and that's difficult enough as it is. But
right.
she started to incorporate mindfulness and yoga into her life. And she started to put little bits of it in her classroom day. And then soon she started to be like, I don't want to teach a regular school day. I want to teach mindfulness and yoga. And she did that. And so one year she hired me to make some artwork to basically award some of the kids for doing a great job and like being good students or being good examples to other students. And that turned into a book where she wrote the words and I wrote the illustration. So that's an example of how I would collaborate with someone because we had a mutual respect for one another. She could do the words, I could do the visuals. With in terms of routine, my kid wakes us up first, so we wake up super early, take them to school, make sure they're fed and they got all the things. And then I usually try to check messages. People don't realize like being a visual artist is excuse me, being an artist is so much about administrative tasks like
Oh
writing
my God.
emails, catching up with people, like promoting your work. Like we just wear so
Woo.
many hats. So I usually do all of that, like answer emails, send out work to remind people I'm that motherfucker. Like look at my shit,
Right.
and then I'll start to like warm up, do some type of warm ups to be like get loose, and then I'll start to work on a project. And usually that gets stopped by time to go pick up the kid, and then start all over again the next day.
Right. That is so amazing. And just so people know, I'm going to mention this at the end again, but if you want to support Robert Lou Trujillo's work, you can go to Robert_Trace on IG. You can also look up his name. Please buy these books, buy them in bulk, use them in your classroom. You also have an incredible YouTube channel. I was really
Thank you. Thank
impressed
you.
because YouTube is really actually difficult to, you got to be super consistent on that. So I know you put a lot of work into that. And it's a great thing for like kids to watch,
Yeah.
especially. I feel like everybody should definitely follow you on YouTube for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the
Uh,
last question, oh, go ahead. Sorry if I
I was gonna
interrupted.
say you've been putting in like major work at TikTok, like to be able to see. I mean, first I remember you just doing a few, and I was like, "What's Maddie doing?" And then like I was like, she looked like she's yelling at people, like, and then like slowly but surely, like the messages, and then like people taking it and using it, and then it going viral, and then like the consistency that you've been able to do with TikTok is quite literally amazing. Because I've been on there for like a year and a half because my cousin was like, Rob, you got to get on there, and I was like, I don't
Mhm.
know. It is hard. It is
It's
really,
really
I don't
hard.
think people realize the amount of labor that goes into thinking about what you're going to post, editing it, posting it, sharing it. Like it is a lot of work. So props to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I actually started TikTok because as a teacher, I've been working at juvenile hall for like almost 8 years, and the pandemic hit, and I was like, how do I reach my students as adolescents? My students are high school age, and so then I was like, well, they're all on TikTok, and everybody was talking smack about TikTok. Oh, it's for dancing. Oh, blah blah
Right.
blah. But I was like, well, I'm not gonna knock it. This is what the kids are using, so I need to like understand it more. And I just started having fun on it. And my first posts that went viral were about like where there was a hashtag actually random things to write about. So it was
Yeah.
to get kids to write poetry. And then I started to do more political stuff and just started organizing with it. But I actually have a piece coming out soon in Hammer and Hope, which is a really important Black leftist magazine that people should check out. And it just talks about the short form video as a format and a tool, whether TikTok or if you're doing it on LinkedIn or YouTube has shorts, just
Yep.
as a way to communicate. Because like you were saying earlier, all of our communication tools, whether it's the newspaper or you know traditional MSNBC, they've all had histories of being taken over by corporate power, being having histories of racism, having histories of appropriation. So it's like we do need to be there still. You know
Right.
what I mean? And I think that's why it's amazing that you're on YouTube as well. Um, so the last question I have for you is just what's one piece of advice you have for up and coming visual artists, especially? What's just
Oh,
one piece
that's
of advice?
That's a great one. That's just a small
Mhm.
question.
I know.
I think a great lost art in becoming a better artist is apprenticeship. So in the
Mm.
graffiti world, there were no classes, there were no like
Ooh, that's
university instruction you could take to get good at it. You apprentice with another writer who was usually older and better than you. And so I think don't sleep on apprenticeship. If there's a poet or a dancer or I don't know, a voice actor, whatever it is, if there's someone who's really rocking and doing like that's what I want to do, try to find a way to volunteer for them. Like all artists need help in some way. So ask them, what can I do to help? And in the exchange, just try to soak up as much game as possible. That's free. You don't have to go into debt to, be an apprentice to someone. The other thing is, I think, learn the language of business. Like a lot of times, I'll get a chance to meet young people who want to be animators or they want to be visual artists, and they say, "Well, my parents they don't really think this is a good field for me." And what is happening is not that your parents or the elders in your life don't care about your art form or that your form of expression or that they don't want you to be happy. They are coming from a place of we have to survive and they want to make sure that you survive. And so in order to do that and to be able to communicate with them, you got to learn the numbers and what business means. Once you can communicate that well to them and say, this is how much I make, this is how often I make it, and this is my what I project to make, then they will be more understanding because you can tell them I have a plan. Um, if they're coming from another place where that's not a regular career or they were barred from even entering that career, it's understandable if they'd be like, that's not a place where you can survive. I want you to survive. So I think apprenticeship, learn your numbers because that will help you save money, but also to make money.
Yeah, that is such an important piece of advice because I would say the vast majority, like 90% of parents are against their kids being artists, and people also don't understand that people that are successful in the arts often come for money because
Right,
it's like a business. It's like being an entrepreneur. Like if you told your parents, "Hey, I want to start a business," they probably be like, "Oh, okay," but they don't think of arts as a business, and it
right.
is. And businesses need seed money, businesses need business plans, they need marketing,
Yep,
so yeah, framing it that way can be helpful. And also like commerce isn't bad. Like,
yep,
we don't have to be exploitative artists. We don't have to, we can decide how we want to, what success looks like for us, what number we need to make for that to
yep.
be a reality. You started a collective, like collectives are a great aspect because we can't go at it alone. We need each other. We
Yeah.
need to be in solidarity. And
Mhm.
yeah, all of those things are super important. And yeah, again, please support his work right now, like how can people
Thank you.
reach out to you, or what's the best way people can support what you're doing? Because it's super important.
Thank you. The best way is robdon'tstop.com. So
Okay,
all
got
one
it.
word,
Rob Dunstop.
robdon'tstop.com. But
Okay.
what you made me think of one last thing is like the like collective or like the power of family or crew or community because when we work together, not only do we have the ability to help one another and lift each other up, but we also learn so much faster and we can like just like sharpen our steel or game ourselves up or like have a little what you call it like friendly competition between one another where we're trying to push each other to get better. So I think whether it's I don't know, a meetup or like a family dinner or like you all go to the same place, like working with finding other people that doing what you do is really a hack to like get better and to like make it sustainable.
That's so true. And that's why, like, I think that, and we need to do a whole nother conversation about debt because there's a lot to unpack with that too.
Yes, yes,
Because there are bad debts, like the debt that we have to go into for healthcare and housing and education. But there are
right,
good debts, and one of the debts is like it's not financial, it's what we owe each other, what we
right,
owe people on the planet. And
right.
I think that as artists, we can remind, the world what we owe and having empathy, like having love for each other. And that's why I often repeat, our love for one another is more powerful than all the systems conspiring against us. So
That's a
not
good one.
just like love in this like, oh, like frivolous way, but like really revolutionary love, like Che talks about, which is about how can we really break down these systems and how can we really work together to create the world that we want to see. So
Yeah,
I want to say
definitely.
thank you again so
Thank you.
much for taking the time to talk to me. Um, Sorry this interview was a little bit quick, but I think we actually went through a lot. And
Yeah,
hopefully, I can support you anytime if you need me. And again, I just really, really appreciate you for taking the time
thank
to be here.
thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah.